Okay, it is about 8:32, and it is Tuesday, March the 9th, 2021. Welcome to week 5. We have one more week to go, and this course will be over. And so I hope that you have learned a lot in this course. One of the things that I keep stressing to students is when you do your assignments to please run them through Grammarly. I explained how Grammarly works week 1. It is important for you to run your papers through Grammarly. If not, then you need to reach out to a tutor to help you to use Grammarly and check the plagiarism box. It is not about just citing the sources. It is also about your original information being more than the information that you copy to create an item, whether it's a flyer or whether it's a written paper. And so several students have thought that when I said Grammarly, I was talking about grammar. I was not talking about grammar. Grammarly. It's the system that we talked about during week 1 to make sure that you run your papers through, because critical thinking, in other words, I need your analysis of the assignment, not just copying material that you discovered from your research, and that there should be more analysis than material copied. And that's it. So every time I run your papers through, that's why I say make sure your papers are Word documents, because I run every paper, with the exception of discussion posts, through Grammarly. And it tells me what the percentage is. And if the percentage is higher than 25%, you're going to lose that. For example, if it says 50%, then you're going to lose half of the grade. And that's how it's going to happen. I don't determine it. The system tells me, and that's what I follow. So I hope that clarifies the understanding that some of you did not have. Not many of you have gotten caught in there, but it is very, very, very important for these next 2 weeks, week 5 and week 6, that you get that right. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and get started and share my screen. All right. So we get to my video, and then you can see the rubric, the recordings. We are at week 5. We have one more to go. These are lectures from week 1 to 4. Okay, before we get to the week 5 announcement, let's go quickly and look at the course calendar. Okay, so here's where we are. You see this? So your reading assignment was Monday, and I gave you the information here. Your initial post is due tonight. Drunk driving. Your live lecture tonight. And then your reply post on drunk driving is due the 13th. And then 14th, that is the last Sunday that assignments will be due. So your written assignment, has a hate crime been committed? We'll talk about that. And then your live classroom lecture. So for this week, you have your discussion posts and your written assignment. Okay, there is no quiz this week. Remember, next week you will have a quiz. If you notice, the course ends the 19th. Our next lecture will take place on the 16th. All right, and then your course ends on the 19th. which all assignments must be in, and it reminds you that it ends at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, not the 20th, not the 21st. I say that every week. Okay, so now let's go to the course home. I did not include the rubric this week. If I need added, but actually you already know that we'll see the rubric in a few minutes when we go into the module. So for week 5, crimes against moral values, chapter 7 of the textbook, I did send you the PowerPoints. You should have them. And then we'll discuss the activities, drug laws, drunk and drug driving, distracted driving, hate crimes, and then go over for practice, drunk driving, forced blood draws, and identify the drug schedule. We'll take a look at that briefly, and then the practice quiz, which, as I constantly have said, is so important. So important. Okay. Your discussion assignment, drunk driving, initial post due tonight. Your reply post due Saturday. Finally, your written assignment, has a hate crime been committed, is due this Sunday, which is the 14th at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Excuse me. And so I encourage you to finish strong. And also remind you of my adversity, springboard to success. You know what that is all about. So now let's get into the module itself. Very important that you pay attention to the things that I talk about in the lecture concerning assignments. So discussion posts, you're going to use these facts, and in your initial post, you're going to determine, has a crime of drugged or drunk driving been committed? Whether it's from the male, the female, or both, explain your position. Explain what enforcement action you would take and what would you do with the truck. Then in your reply post, you deal with another student's post. Again, remind you that the guides, I already told you about using that to help you out as well. So now let's talk about the one written assignment that you have this week. So we're talking about crimes against moral values, which some say are victimless crimes, but I don't agree with that. You'll hear me talk about that in a minute. So this is a 3-part assignment. Did you hear me? 3, not 2, not 1. 3-part assignment. So you're going to play various roles. Each scenario and each part should be 1 full page. 1 full page, not 3/4 of a page. There are a few students who said to me, well, I can't write a full page. Yes, you can if you do the proper amount of research and provide the details. Yes, you can. So the part 1, excuse me, analyze and apply hate crimes from the perspective of a police officer. And you're going to look at this scenario, and it's going to be a minimum of 1 page. You see that? And by the way, one student asked me, say, why do you require 1 page? I don't, but the reason why we say 1 page is the course developers have determined that to adequately and properly deal with the issue, they set the number of pages. So that means that by the mere fact that you have a shortage of pages means you don't adequately. And you see my comment saying that you miss points because you did not satisfy the minimum requirements. Okay. And so you're going to deal with in 1 page these 3 points from a police officer perspective. Then you have a whole nother scenario from the perspective of a defense attorney. Okay, and you use this scenario, and once again, it's a minimum of 1 page. Remember, it's APA, excuse me, double space, should be a cover page, should be a page for references. There shouldn't be just one citation in the body, but there should be at least 2 at a minimum citations. But remember what citations are for. If you take information you include in your written assignments from a source you discover from your research, in order to not violate academic integrity, cite your sources. We said that from day one. Very, very, very important. But also be aware that all your papers are going to be run through Grammarly. So you want to make sure that you have your analysis outweigh the information that you copy from a source, because it will let me know where you got that information from, and you will be dinged for points. So you're going to deal with these 2 issues. What elements must the state prove to demonstrate that this is a hate crime? From the perspective of a defense attorney, remember what the state has to prove. And then what would you use as defense attorney to show that Luke didn't intentionally target the victim for a hate crime? Then the third part, by the way, please do me a favor, separate, don't continue on the same page. Start a whole nother page and label it part 1, part 3, detective perspective, so that I will know what I'm looking at. Hear me again. Do not run it all together. If you do, I'm not going to try to figure it out, and you're going to need to make sure that you do it right. It's pretty easy to finish up. You can go over a page. I don't care, but at least satisfy the minimum requirement. So now the last part is a detective. Now, be aware that you start out as a police officer. Remember, the police officer is the one that initially responds. The detective come later, and you're going to deal with this from perspective of being a detective. So you're going to analyze the hate crime laws from the perspective of a detective, and the case reported by the patrol officer. So basically, you should be able to utilize some help from what you discovered in part 1. But this is the scenario that you're using. You're not using exactly the same scenario, and this requires a minimum of 1 page. All right, so define femicide and elaborate on it. Explore a hate crime law and determine if cases of femicide are hate crimes, and if not, why not? Make sure you cite your sources. APA, very important, and references at the end. Okay, now let's go and look at the rubric. For 40 points, notice what happens. 10 points for the police officer perspective done properly. 10 points for the defense attorney properly. Notice how many pages it says. And then the detective perspective. And then make sure that there are no typos, no misspellings. Make sure it's in paragraph form. Make sure it's double space. And then properly cited with a title page and reference page. Can't be any more clear than this. Any questions? Type in the chat box. Do you have any questions? Okay, so those of you who are not here, the only way you can ask questions is if you reach out to me. I always tell people, once again, as the assignment will be due Sunday, don't send me an email Saturday or Sunday or even Friday, because you're going to need time to complete this. I would text me or call me. I already told you the parameters. You have the broadest parameters of any professor that you will ever have with me. Can't give you any broader parameters than that. So you want to get that done. All right. So I repeat again, each page should be properly labeled, and then citations on every section and references at the end. Incidentally, your reference page shouldn't be 8 references and 2 citations, unless there's 2 citations, unless they all should be indicated in citations. The references give the source, but also in the body, it gives credit for where you get statements or information that you use in your papers. Might sound like it's repetitious, but it is not. They're for 2 different purposes, because the reference actually gives the complete source, the volume, and all of that, where you got the information from as well. All right. So those are the assignments. So now let's spend the rest of the time talking about crimes against moral values. So again, we're going to talk about drug laws, drunk and drug driving, distracted driving, and excuse me, conclude with hate crimes. And then the key terms. We're going to go over that, which I show you how they did it. Remember, they changed it to a Word doc. And then we're going to go over these 3. Okay. Then we're going to call it a night. So now, as you should be aware, crime and drugs go hand in hand. People, when you take the J150 course, and some of you are in that with me at the same time as this course, you will hear me say time and time again that there is a correlation between crime and drugs. People commit crimes to support their drug habits. And so some may say that using drugs is not harmful to anybody but that individual, and say that it's purely morality and should not be controlled by law. The reason why it's controlled by law, first of all, number one, is because these drugs, for the most part, are harmful to the body and dangerous, and can cause serious injury, permanent injury, illnesses, and death. And you can become addicted to these drugs, and it could send your life spiraling down. So it says drug laws are unique from criminal law perspective because when drugs are ingested, it's an individual's choice to do so. And that the person most at risk of harm is the user. I beg to differ, because of the fact that individuals are harmed, innocent bystanders are caught constantly in drug wars where gangs or individuals are using weapons to protect their turf. Other crimes that take place, such as robbery, are motivated, as I said earlier, by addicts who commit these crimes to obtain money to purchase drugs. So we're going to deal primarily today with enforcement, use, possession, and sale of illegal drugs and narcotics. So now, one of the things you can see is that the higher on the lower on the schedule, I should say, the more serious the drug. So you would think of it the other way around, but no. Schedule 1 drugs are drugs like, as they say, heroin, LSD, ecstasy, and marijuana. Now, as you probably will say, hey, wait, isn't marijuana being legalized all across the country? Yes. But I still say to you that it will come off Schedule 1 because of that. But look at what the definition says. There's still a high potential for abuse. It says no currently accepted medical use in the United States. What about glaucoma? That's small. But most people who use marijuana don't do it for glaucoma. Okay? Lack of demonstrated safety under medical supervision. In other words, individuals will overuse these items and will result in what we call OD, or overdosing, from the use of these drugs. Heroin, LSD, and ecstasy can send you on what we call a trip, where you could operate out of your mind and not operate in your right mind. And sometimes the trip that you go into lasts longer, where there's permanent brain damage done to the individual, and some people never return to the state they were before that. Schedule 2 drugs, oxycodone, fentanyl, opium, and cocaine, which we are dealing with on an epidemic level. If you take my introduction to drugs and crimes course, you would discover that it also has a high potential for abuse. It says acceptable medical use, but what happens is people overuse these. May lead to psychological or physical dependence, which means that you can even start as easily by starting out with painkillers and graduate to oxycodone, fentanyl, opium, and cocaine. Yeah, because it's a form of cocaine. It is a form of cocaine because it fits the mode. It is and that's a very good question, because when it says cocaine, that crack fits right in there. As a matter of fact, one of the things about crack that you should be aware of is crack is a manufactured drug from cocaine, but they use all kinds of chemicals to simmer it up on the stove. I shared before that I was the village attorney, prosecutor, and a police officer in what was called the crack cocaine capital of the south suburbs, a town called Ford Heights. And I had a chance to see the effects of what crack cocaine can do to people. In fact, one of my sisters, the first sibling I lost, was in 1994, and she overdosed on cocaine, crack cocaine, and they found her dead. So it's a highly addictive drug. And the way that crack cocaine operates is that you will get a high, and then you will spend time trying to achieve that same level of highness, but you really never get it. So what you do is you continue to increase the amount, and ultimately your heart operates like a balloon. When you blow too much air in it, it explodes, and that person drops dead instantly from cardiac arrest. And that's how it works. I saw this in a video when I was in the police academy. Opium, like I said again, we have very serious problems. The life of people change because of using opioids and opium. It's a plant, but it gets you to the point that you can be strung out and stuck, and your quality of life will disappear. You'll lie and then you will not take care of your hygiene and things of that nature. Schedule 3, dealing with Tylenol, with codeine, Suboxone, ketamine, and anabolic steroids. And what people use is that it deals with psychological, and it actually it will graduate you to Schedule 2, the use of oxycodone or opium as well. Schedule 3, it talks about Valium. Again, I'm one of those individuals that I'm very, very concerned with painkillers. I've had a number of friends who were professional athletes who have gone to doctors for pain after surgery, and they got hooked on them, and they graduated and went up the schedule because of that, ending up in with oxycodone at Schedule 2, and their whole quality of life was gone. So I'm very, very careful about those. I don't take them a long time because they can become highly addictive, and your body can also reach the stage where you take those painkillers and your body needs more. So what do? You increase the dose, and then that's not good enough. So you go up the schedule for something that's even stronger. And so there you are, hooked and become a junkie. Then the final schedule is cough syrup. If you notice in the stores, things that involve codeine and that, you can't really get them unless you go behind the counter, because of the fact that they recognize now, based on the law, that individuals buy these not for medicine, but use them as drugs. And so this next paragraph talks about crack cocaine and how I was telling you about that. The war on drugs, which started in the 80s, that's when I was a police officer, and just say no became a popular slogan. But I'm going to tell you something. Just say no is something that when a person is hooked on drugs is easier said than done. Because when a person is hooked on drugs, they need to be delivered. They need to detox. They need to go through the stages of withdrawal so that they will not become permanently addicted to that. And as long as there are individuals who use these drugs, then the drug dealers will make money. I represented many individuals in drug court, and one of the requirements in drug court generally is that individuals who we do plead guilty will be required to get some help. And to the extent that they're able to get the help and be liberated from the drugs, then they will be able to be successful. Unfortunately, as I've said before, locking people up a long time who have a drug problem without addressing the issue is just a waste of time. In fact, it makes the bad situation worse. And we need to recognize and understand that individuals who are addicted are sick, just like someone who has COVID or the flu or a cold even, and that we need to recognize and treat it like that. And so now this next paragraph, it talks about what I talked about earlier, that the law is changing with marijuana, and many states since this was written have legalized marijuana, including my home state of Illinois. I don't know if your state has or not, but there are parlors all over the state that are regulated by the state. So Jonah, are you in Minnesota, right? Yeah, well, they're working on it. Yeah. Almost every jurisdiction is pretty much working on it. And so it says some believe that marijuana has legitimate medical advantages, but the Schedule 1 designation, yeah, yeah, the designation makes it difficult for medical research. Many believe that marijuana should be a Schedule 2 like cocaine, which would expand its use in research. So that's what I was telling you. It's moving down from 1. And so the Uniform Controlled Substance Act, which regulates the amount of drugs and the percentage that individuals can be arrested for and serve time or be considered as not for personal use, but for uh, possession, delivery, and sale to individuals. And these are the individuals who receive the greater of the sentences. It is sad when an individual who has a smaller quantity of drugs ends up going to jail, excuse me, for extended periods of time rather than getting the help they need. So you, like I said, you aggravate the problem. Okay. So you can look at the Uniform Crime Control laws. And so now there's two kinds of possession for drugs. There's what we call actual possession, and that's when a person has physical control. For example, a baggie of cocaine in their pocket. Constructive occurs in instances when a person has the ability to control the item, but it's not on their person. For example, a marijuana pipe within the automobile operating the vehicle. So what that means is that if you own the house and it's found in there legally, then you can be held responsible even if it's not on you. That's why you have to be careful who's in your vehicle as well, because of the fact that if a person is stopped, usually one of the first things that they will do, if they have it on their possession, if they're a passenger or either the driver, is try to hide it in the vehicle. And so then constructive possession takes place. And so, and look at what it says as an example: knowingly possessing of a controlled substance or controlled substance analog. Now, here's what an analog is. Again, I talk about this in detail in Drugs and Crime. These are manufactured drugs like K2 or Spice. But these analog drugs, what attracts people to them is people utilize them and they are not able to be detected on a drug test. However, you can still serve time for distributing them. Um, so, and it gives, and like I said again, it's very harsh when you get to a large quantity beyond, like for example, the way Michigan has it, beyond 450 grams. And so look what it says. Michigan reduces the maximum punishment to not more than 30 years imprisonment. But that's again based on a dealer quantity. And you'll see that time again, like in Florida and so forth. So the key thing, methamphetamine is a manufactured drug. And so it fits within the category of Schedule 2. Schedule 2. Or it could be Schedule 1, depending on the kind of drug. It's high up because the effects are very, very, very serious. Because they're very highly addictive. Does that answer your question? A little. Okay, what is it that you're still missing? the one thing that you should be aware is that the more addictive something is, the lower on the schedule it's going to be. And the more it's lower on the schedule, the more involved. If you take a look at these schedules, uniform control criminal laws, then you'll have the answer to your question, the direct answer. But the key thing is that the more harm that it puts on the individual, then the lower, I should say, up on the list. And the reason why I say lower, I mean the number, but it's really higher. So if it's number one, then that means it's more serious. Does that make sense? Okay. So now let's talk about drunk. So we've talked about using drugs, but let's talk about driving under influence. And in many jurisdictions, it is quite clear that one of the major causes of serious injury and death in the United States is driving under the influence. And it's so serious that it gives these statistics in here. You can see one person dies every 53 minutes in an alcohol-related crash. Alcohol-impaired driving account for 31% of all driving fatalities. And so what happened is that when I first started practicing law, individuals were given a percentage of 0.10 blood alcohol content, which meant that that person was driving under the influence. And so many people were killed that in the 90s, the federal government established 0.08 blood alcohol content that made it illegal per se, which means that if you blew on the breath test 0.08 or earlier 0.10, you were considered as driving under influence, even if you thought you could control the vehicle. And so so all the states changed to 0.08, and then that person was considered legally impaired. And so drunk driving exists, laws exist in every state, and it pretty much hits these 3 points. If you're operating or driving a motor vehicle, did you hear me? A motor vehicle, not a bicycle, but a motor vehicle upon a highway, roadway, parking lot, or driveway accessible to the public. So, would a bobsled, would a sled qualify for that? Yes or no? Does it have a motor? Does it have a motor? Excuse me. If it has a motor, it will qualify. If it does not, it wouldn't qualify. Notice that it can be up on a highway, a roadway, or parking lot, or driveway accessible to the public while impaired by alcohol. Okay. So here's the deal. How do you know if a person is under physical control of a vehicle? And here's the pretty standard definition of that. If you're in the driver's position of the front seat of a vehicle or in the driver's position of a streetcar or a trolley and having possession of the vehicle's trackless trolley ignition key or other ignition device. Now, can you be found guilty of physical control of a vehicle if your keys are in your pocket or in your purse? Yes or no? Depends. My car that I have is a 2012 MKZ, and it needs the key in the ignition. My wife has a Mercedes that's 2019. You could start her car by pushing the button if the keys are anywhere in the vehicle. So that's why I say it depends. Depends on the kind of vehicle. You see why I said that? Yeah. So more and more vehicles have that starter mechanism where you don't physically have to have the keys in your hand, but if the keys are within it, it's like a Bluetooth operation where you can start the car by simply pushing that button for ignition and having your feet on the brake. That's exactly how it works. So being in the driver's position puts you in that position. When drivers crash and injure others, the criminal act is causing injury by driving under the influence. A drunk driver cannot be charged with a homicide or injury by intoxicated use of a vehicle for injuring or killing themselves. But if they do with someone else, then they can be charged with involuntary manslaughter or voluntary manslaughter, depending upon the jurisdiction. Okay, it says when drunk drivers kill, they are not charged with intentional homicide due to intoxication or lack of intent, but when they cause death, the criminal act is often referred to as a homicide, because the homicide is when someone dies. So how do you prove that the person operated the motor vehicle while under the influence of a drug or alcohol with a BAC of 0.80, or if the driver is considered impaired and causes the death of another? Okay, very important. Now, one of the things that you need to be aware of is that if you do not take the breath test, and there are some people who are very smart and think they are anyway, to not take the breath test, what happens to their license? Do you know? What happens? Do you know? Yep, your driver's license can be suspended, because what you're doing is you're removing the possibility of the prosecution having the evidence that's necessary to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you are driving under the influence. So therefore, the burden goes away from them in that. So, all right. So what we do is we've learned to do what we call field sobriety tests. And things that we look for. And you've probably seen these. You've seen people driving, weaving through traffic, driving through a traffic signal, striking a curb. I've seen people come down the street and they go and they strike the curb on the lane, on the side where they're supposed to be, and drive across the line and strike the opposite curb. I've actually had plates like that where I've written down or taken the information and reached out to the police. Somebody says, "Oh, wow, you turned somebody in." No, I may have saved their life or the life of some innocent person that could come along, because you are aware of the fact that, and it's a real serious thing to consider, is that people will be driving on the right side of the street that they're supposed to be, and a car where a person coming in the opposite direction is driving under the influence and could come and cross over and kill those people or seriously injure them. So let's look at some of this. The odor of intoxicants you can smell, or the red or bloodshot eyes, or slurred speech. Now, slurred speech may or may not indicate that that person is driving under the influence. I knew of a case years ago of an individual who was a physician who was stopped by a police officer and given a DUI, and they smelled what they thought was alcohol, but the person was having a stroke. And the individual, of course, the lawyer friend who represented them, was able to get them off. So these are just some of the indicators that most of the time do fit that, okay? Red or bloodshot eyes too may or may not, because sometimes people are rubbing their eyes and tired. But certainly the smell of alcohol is a giveaway. Then we do the field sobriety test, the horizontal gaze test, the walk and turn test, or the one-legged. You know, you've seen that before, when you asked to stand on one leg, to follow the hands or the fingers of the officer, and if you are under the influence, then you're not able to, and that could be drugs or alcohol. Okay. So again, I've already kind of talked about this, is that when a person is stopped by the police and asked to submit to a chemical test, that is the blood alcohol, the test results are that are used in court proceedings to determine the extent of impairment. And states have what we call, as I said earlier, what we call implied consent laws. And if you do not submit to it, then you can have your license suspended, and penalties are usually increased as well. Now, so there's a case that deals with the warrant issue of checking the blood and stuff like that in Missouri versus McNeely, where before McNeely came about in 2013, which was after I had retired, the law enforcement could force a blood draw because the alcohol rapidly dissipates in the body. But the McNeely case said, no, that was invasive. And so now law enforcement officers must get a warrant to force a blood draw in a drunk driving case unless other exigent circumstances that require immediate action can be established. Okay. So you can no longer do it just that way. Drugged driving is when a person is impaired under drugs. They could be legal drugs or they can be illegal drugs. Okay. And so to determine drug driving, the U.S. have what they call drug recognition experts, or DREs, or DREs as we call them, and they are able to identify persons who are drug impaired, and that they testify in court about it. All right. So you can be guilty of driving under the influence of drugs let's say, for example, if you took your medication twice and didn't realize you took it twice and drove, you would be driving under influence. However, you might have a defense in a situation like that. Okay. But the DRE test look at the blood pressure of the individual, the heart rate, the size of the pupil, and how they react to light and so forth and so on, and other things. Here's a whole video that you can take a look at that on your own time. All right. So we got 2 more to go. Distracted driving. Distracted driving is anything that takes your attention away from operating the vehicle. And that's it. That's pretty much what it means. One of the most common ways of doing that is texting while driving. But it can even go as far as a person driving while talking or eating or drinking. Doesn't have to be alcohol. Or those kind of things, messing with the radio or the entertainment system or the navigation system. Basically anything that takes your mind off of driving. People don't realize it, but people often drive in a trance. Do you know what I mean when I say driving in a trance? Yes, because what happens is you'll drive and you don't realize, dang, you ever passed your stop? We all have, right? Excuse me. And so the point of the matter is that you have to be very careful and pay close attention to what you're doing. So, but there are laws now that have operated and brought it to the point that we have now in almost every jurisdiction I know of, hands-free devices. If you have your hands on your phone, which I see people doing it all the time, it is dangerous because all it takes is 1 second, 1 split second. And then there are public service announcements that remind people all the time not to drive distracted. And so it results in serious injury or death. And so it's a very, very big issue. Okay. It says drunk driving and drug driving continue to plague the U.S. and unfortunately injure innocent motorists. And all of these crimes can be prevented by motorists making the right choices back to drug and drunk driving, but also applicable with distracted driving as well. And it's not just teens who are doing it, but teens do it quite a bit. Quite a bit. People stop at a stoplight and they'll look at their phone. You know, I always had a issue with the navigation systems. You know, those things that, you know, they're like on the dashboard. And I've always said that that's like a TV screen there, and people can be busy watching that and get into an accident. Do you agree with me? Do you agree? Do you think I'm correct? Yeah. Yeah. So you know. Okay, so you drive for a living, so you exactly get what I'm talking about. And so there are people who have you discovered that with vehicles, they try to put them close to level so that you don't have to look down, but they're closer to, so you can still focus on the road in front of you. That might cut it down some, but it doesn't eliminate it. So the key thing is pay attention to where you're going, okay? That's why you have a big windshield and you have a little bitty mirror so you can see what's coming up behind you or next to you, those kinds of things, you know. So you have to be very, very, very careful. One of the things that I learned a long time ago when I was getting my license, long time ago, is always whenever I'm getting ready to switch a lane, is not just to use my side mirror, but actually when I first started doing it, they didn't have a side mirror so much. They had a rear view mirror, but the side mirror can also have a blind spot. So I kind of like glance a little bit over my shoulder and look out the back. You know what I'm talking about, Jonah? You know what I mean? Because you can switch a lane and that vehicle for just that split second is in that blind spot. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you want to be careful about that. All right. So now let's conclude with dealing with hate crimes. So what is a hate crime? A hate crime is when you commit any crime, but it is directed at the individual because of their race, sexual preference, or disability, just to name a few. So the individual is targeted because of their category. And so what has happened is that the federal government came up in 68 under President Johnson and under 18 USC 249. By the way, if you see 18 US, that means that's the federal statute for all criminal laws for the whole country is in 18 United States Code. And so it became a crime to use force or threaten a person on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin. And then since that time, it now deals with one's sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. And more and more states now have those crimes as well, so that the crime does not arise to a federal level, the jurisdiction in which you commit that crime. And what it does is it increases the possible sentence that an individual can receive for crimes such as battery, robbery, vandalism, or arson, criminal damage to property, and things of that nature. Okay, here's what it says here to give you an idea. In Wisconsin, intentionally committing a crime against another and selecting that person or their property in whole or in part because of the actor's belief, the person who commits the crime, perception regarding to the race, religion, color, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, or ancestry, whether or not the actor believes or perception was correct. And so hate crimes are now on the rise, as you know, in this country. There's been attacks on churches, synagogues, and other places of worship. There have been attacks on LGBT people. There has been attacks upon individuals who had certain kinds of disability, but LGBT people are really catching it a whole lot. And so one of the things that can really nail a person down is their mouth and how they do it, or something in writing that they did. So the point of the matter is if it's established by the evidence that the targeting is based upon one of those categories, then it can end up as a hate crime. Okay. And so you could read the Supreme Court case of Wisconsin versus Mitchell, in which the defendant Mitchell, an African American, was sentenced to 2 additional years in prison for intentionally targeting and instigating a fight against a white victim. Mitchell's intent to target a white victim was demonstrated by the words that he says, "There goes a white boy, go get him," just before the victim was chased down and battered. So he was convicted of aggravated battery in violation of the Wisconsin hate crime law because he intentionally selected the victim because of his race. Mitchell argued that the penalty enhanced violation affected his free speech rights. Well, the United States Supreme Court and I would disagree with him, with Mitchell, and concluded that his right to free speech ended when he carried out that act. So he spoke and then carried it out. Okay, so it's not free speech and doesn't protect. All right, so you can take time to read that case as well, and then you look at some of the statutes here. And that's it for this week. Let's take a look at the key terms. So you can click on and open it up, and you'll see download it. Let me move this down. Download on your computer or print up a study sheet. I repeat, do not use this when taking your test. That is a violation of the academic integrity policy. I'm telling you. Well, some students say, well, nobody's going to know. It'll show up eventually. And I always say that a student who violates academic integrity in school eventually gets messed up in their career. Okay. Oh, they don't have any key terms in here. Okay. Looks like they left them out. So that's where you would find them. So I guess they didn't put any in this week. I'll have to tell them. Yeah, so you won't be able to use that. But in chapter 4, when I talked about it last week, you saw it. So anyway, so the best thing to do here is practice for drunk driving and forced blood draws. Is consider this scenario here, and then study this to determine your best course of action dealing with Missouri versus McNeely. Think about your answer, then download the document to see if you're on the right track. There it is right there for the ideal answer. Try not to do that first. All right. Then you have identify the drug schedule. So don't skip this because it will help you. This is one that will work. And so you start the activity and you match these up. Okay. Drugs that have a lower potential for abuse but may lead to moderate dependence, and you line them up. Drugs that have no accepted medical use, do have medical use, so forth. I'm not going to do these, but you're going to do this yourself, and then you submit it and it'll tell you if you got it right or wrong. But that will help you to get ready. All right. I would go on with it, but we're a little over time and I don't want to keep you too long. And then the last one is the practice quiz. I have stated time and time again the importance of the practice quiz. And so a couple weeks ago, you took the actual quiz and you discovered that, wow, he told the truth. He told us pay close attention to these because these are the kinds of things. So let's answer just a few of these. According to the federal law, marijuana is a Schedule what drug with high potential for abuse and no current accepted? Yep. So, yep. So you know that one. That's right. You are a police officer and you stopped a motor vehicle for speeding. While standing along the open driver's window, you smelled marijuana coming from the vehicle. A search reveals marijuana in the center console. The driver claims it's not his. You may still enforce action because the driver is in what possession of the marijuana? Yep. Some people might say partial. That's because they didn't study it. But it's either actual or constructive. Those are the only two. And so this is constructive. Last one. Whoops. Okay. Incident to a lawful arrest. You search Jane and find cocaine in her front left pocket. Jane claims it's not hers while stating, "These aren't my pants," although she was wearing them. You arrest Jane. This is an example of what kind of possession? Yeah. Yeah, well, Jane, you're wearing the pants, so you get caught. And so, yeah. So those are the kinds of things that you want to pay attention to as well. And so you want to go back and look at week 4 as well to help you prepare. Okay. Any questions? You have a question? You don't have no questions? How about what's the key phrase? All right. Hate crime. That's it. Oh, you were guessing it? Is it written on here? Does this you could write hate crime or hate crimes. You get your points. All right, so I'm gonna say good night. I will see you next week for the final lecture. All right, that will be on the 16th. So enjoy your week. Stay safe. Um, if you can, get your shot. You're out there. I finally landed being able to get one. I'm getting my first Moderna on Sunday, so I'm glad. And so then I was kind of hoping I can get the Johnson and Johnson, but I took the first one that I could get. So, oh wow, sorry to hear that. So you got a period of time before you go through that. You got a shelter in place. You got people in your house, family members. You have family members. Oh, okay. So you all are going to have to shelter in place for the 14 days at least. And then has everybody else been tested? Good, good. And they're okay? Oh, wow. Okay, well, I'll keep you guys in my prayers. Are you anybody asymptomatic? Just have the they don't really have symptoms, but know that you tested positive? Oh, okay. She's asymptomatic. Okay. Well, I'll keep you in my prayers. Let me know if it interferes with you getting your assignments done on time. Please reach out to me and just let me know. And I'll be happy, but sorry to hear that. But take care of this. And then after you get past that point, talk to your doctor about being able to do what you need to do. I've been fortunate to be careful with it, wearing my mask and stuff like that, minimizing my exposure. I have a daughter who, she doesn't live with us anymore, but she can't come in the house because she likes to party. And so I already told her. So, but again, I'm going to follow the guidelines that the CDC has said because I believe in the science. So, well, again, I'll keep you guys in my prayers. Stay safe, feel better, and get well soon. And I'll see you next week. All right. Good night.